Otherwise, it would be somebody else's show, I suppose, but it's mine. I have an important announcement today. After careful consideration and consultation with close family and friends, I've decided to be a victim. That's right. I kind of got tired of the whole oppressor thing. Here's what it boiled down to. I'm old, I'm white, I'm a Christian man, and I still have a job at my age. That means that could be the definition of oppressor right then and there. But I'm old. I am old. And therefore, I think I should be a victim. I should be known as a victim. And really what it boiled down to, ladies and gentlemen, I looked at the possibilities here, and there's really only two, oppressor or victim. And I decided there was a lot more money in being a victim. I mean, somebody's always suing somebody for millions of dollars because they stubbed their toe or some doggone thing. And it seems like victims have so much more fun. They spent most of last summer burning down Portland. Or it was the summer of 2020, excuse me. Every day and every night, there was somebody on the streets in front of the federal buildings in Portland raising hell, trashing cars, spray painting cars, on occasion robbing someone, and throwing rocks and frozen bottles at police, as if they had some sort of right to do that. Now, the infantile 15-year-old in me, who still exists, even though if you go to StreamYard right now, you'll see I don't really look like anywhere near 15. I had a girlfriend once for 15 years. But yeah, the idea of no rules anywhere appeals to my 15-year-old lizard brain. But the mayor of Portland, Mayor Ted Wheeler, he's one of those touchy-feely West Coast type mayors. He decided that, well, since Trump was still president back in 2020, of course. Since Trump was president, these people in the street who wore masks and dark clothing and committed all sorts of mayhem were legitimate protesters. As a matter of fact, the female mayor of Seattle, Washington, described a similar situation in her city. Well, for a while, if you recall, people who were masked, dressed all in black, wore goggles sometimes, those big fly opaque glasses. You couldn't tell who this person was, what race they were, and frankly, what gender they were. That's another thing I thought about. I thought about being another gender, but I couldn't think of what. There's already 46 out there. If I declared a new gender, what would it be? Old white man's pretty much been covered. Anyway, if you can help me with a new gender that doesn't require me to sleep with somebody who looks like me, I would appreciate it. 955-1400, 955-1400. That's really the only requirement. Well, of course, I know some of my listeners, so they would have to be human beings as well, all right? That doesn't require me to sleep with somebody of my own gender, and they're human beings. Let's leave out, I don't want to even get into it, but, let's just narrow it to that. Again, there seems to be a lot more money in being a victim. Cities, states, I mean, wow. They pay a lot of money. Millions of dollars. Because somebody was a victim. Somebody was a victim somewhere. I need in on that action. I don't think I'm going to win the lottery. I just don't. And that's kind of a bummer. So I've decided to be a victim. When you see me or when you refer to me, please don't forget to begin by saying that poor victim Mike Devine, who certainly deserves some sort of compensation for all the oppression that he has suffered over these many, many years. And I mean, many, many, many years. Absolutely. And if anybody wants transcripts of video or audio transcripts of my show, I will be happy to provide them. Only it'll cost you $600,000. We believe in transparency and all that sort of thing, but there is some kind of limit there, There's got to be some kind of limit. So, yeah, we got to have that. Without a doubt. $600,000, over $600,000, of course, is what Linamar School District is trying to charge both Jake Hall and Randy Evans. So please ramp it up. Request transcripts and just bring your $600,000 in small bills, please. This is AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. It's 221. Still cold, of course, about 12 degrees above zero. Not as cold as we've had it, that's for sure. And let's not forget that, what am I not forgetting? Oh, of course, big time wrestling duel tonight. Number 1, Penn State, and they are stacked from the 125-pound class to heavyweight. There's hardly any relief in that lineup. And, of course, there's not much relief for Penn State either. I mean, they got to start. I think Drake Ayala is still the 125-pounder. There's another guy there. I can't remember his name, and his face is right in front of me. But I think Drake's going to start it out tonight. God, he was just wrestling in the senior high gym here last year. And he's still as impressive as others as he ever was. He's running in some stiff competition, of course. I mean, some of the guys he's wrestling are older and more experienced at Division I level than he is. But Bob Thompson and the crew out at Fort Dodge Senior High seem to have prepared him well for his wrestling career, wherever he wants to take it. I mean, Coach Tom Brands, the University of Iowa, alluded to that. I'm not quoting here, but he said Drake Ayala can do whatever he wants to do. He can go wherever he wants to. And I believe it. We've had some great wrestlers come out of Fort Dodge the last few years. Teskey, of course, the Lara brothers, great wrestlers. And I'll be tuned in tonight. I think it starts at 7. This could be this is the duel, I'm sure, that will decide who's really number 1 at the end of the season. No offense to the other programs. Wrestling actually seems to, and it might be my imagination, it seems to have had a resurgence. Judging by, and maybe this is false criteria. Of course it is. It's not a scientific study. But when Iowa went to Ohio State, and Ohio won, the Ohio State wrestler beat Drake Ayala, is what I was trying to say. But Iowa won the duel over Ohio State, and the Ohio State gym, if you want to call it that, was full of people, and they were into it. Now, I know that Iowa and Ohio State have a rivalry. Tom Ryan, the coach at Ohio State, was a wrestler, one of Dan Gable's wrestlers way back, one of the Gable wrestling tree. And, of course, Cale Sanderson over at Penn State is from Iowa State. And a terrific wrestler. I mean, that guy was one of the most smooth wrestlers I've ever seen in my life. The University of Iowa wrestlers, Gable, the Brands twins, Gable always taught them to be super aggressive, and Cale Sanderson was too, but he wasn't so much on the brute force thing like maybe the Brands brothers were. And I love the Brands brothers. I loved watching the Brands brothers. But if you wanted to see technical perfection, in college wrestling meet or match, rather, check out Cale Sanderson in the NCAA final. Bobby Douglas was still down there. Is that his name? Gosh, I'm getting old. See, I'm an older white man and I'm losing my hearing. So there we go. I'm losing my memory. I'm losing everything. So I really should get some money from somebody. Shouldn't I be able to sue somebody for my pain and suffering? Historically, old white people have been at a disadvantage. They put us in rest homes and forget about it. So I think as reparations, old white people then should come forward in big numbers. And I was suggesting we throw rocks, but I guess we can't throw very well anymore. Nevin Mulholland and Randy Coolman will be in here a little bit later on to talk sports, and they might say that they can still throw, but they really can't. Randy was a good quarterback at Humboldt High School. Nevin played ball through school, of course. I don't know if Nevin was just a defensive back or if he played offense. He was a St. Edmund guy, of course. Back in those days when they had a bigger enrollment of St. Edmunds, maybe they had players for both sides of the ball. I don't know. I remember Adam Fellers, who was in school with my son, also with Nick Mosier and others. Fellers would sometimes play on both sides of the ball. Maybe Blake Utley did too. I don't know. Blake's another kid that stayed in town, or kid. Those guys are pushing 40 now. He's the head baseball coach out there, and he's doing a great job. Baseball is my real sport, by the way. I love wrestling, but if you ask me what my favorite sport is, I got to tell you it's baseball. 955-1400 if you'd like to join the program. 955-1400 if you'd like to join the program and tell us about your victimhood. I think if you're an old person, you should call that number and relate stories of the historical wrongs of old people. If you're some other gender or something, or you think you are, well, that doesn't really count because that's, you're a victim and that's something the Democratic Party can get behind. Oh, real oppression is, felt by people like Bruce Jenner, who's 6'2", 230 pounds, and a world-class athlete. I don't know. I can't, it's just too much. Glad I talked to Governor Kim Reynolds yesterday, and she said, no, we're not going to teach that sort of nonsense in the schools, and that's a good thing. The news is coming up.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
Well, www.gundersonfuneralhome.com. Mr. Francis Richard Dick Laurent has passed. Dick Laurent, 86 years old of Fort Dodge, died on Wednesday at the Friendship Haven. There will be a family service held at the Tompkins Celebration Center at Friendship Haven with military honors. Gunderson Funeral Home serving the family. Obituaries this hour brought to you by Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 1615 North 15th Street here in Fort Dodge. You may contact Gunderson Funeral Home and Cremation Services by calling 576-7128 or online at www.gundersonfuneralhome.com.
Michael Devine and Janice Valentine, now at AM 1400 KVFD.
That's right. That voice retired, and I'm so sorry. And I just love the way it says that. Michael Devine and Janice Valentine. The fabulous Janice is, in fact, on the air with us. How you doing, Janice?
I'm fabulous, Mike. I didn't know he retired.
Well, this particular voice did.
Okay.
He was the stadium announcer for the Kansas City Royals baseball game, and he wasn't a big guy, but he had this great voice, and he enhanced it electronically as well. And it's all good, but I think he retired or stopped doing it or something. I don't know. Janice Valentine is an attorney here in town. She practices primarily in workers' compensation and personal injury. There is no fee for first consultation with Janice Valentine. She's at Valentine Law Office, BC, and you can reach her by going to her email address at jvalentine@valentinelaw.net or call her at 955-5544. That's her office number. She's at 415 the Boston Center, 809 Central Avenue, Fort Dodge. To find out more, go to www.valentinelaw.net. This topic should be right in your wheelhouse, Janice. President Biden has sworn, and has sworn to put a black female judge on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you for a little bit. If the law truly is objective, if the judge's role is to follow the Constitution, shouldn't the gender and the color of a person be irrelevant to a Supreme Court position?
Well, I think we all want the courts that oversee not only the country, but even our local courts. We want them to reflect what our communities and our nation look like.
Well, excuse me, I have to interrupt you there. A lot of people will say that. But that sounds like the focus is not on qualifications, not on allegiance to the Constitution, but on race and gender. Is that what you believe is appropriate?
No. And the qualifications is number one. Yeah. I mean, we're not seating somebody. I'm on the State Judicial Nominating Commission. My number one concern is qualifications, and that includes temperament, judicial presence, character, all those types of things. And we presume, the oath is that you're going to follow the Constitution of the United States, and if you're an Iowa judge, the Iowa Constitution as well. Mm-hmm. So those are givens. Nobody is going to be put up for a Supreme Court appointment that doesn't pass those two musters, in my opinion. I mean, by the time you're in the running or consideration for a Supreme Court appointment, you have the judicial qualifications, or you should have the judicial qualifications to manage the office. I see this as really no different than when Ronald Reagan was running for president in 1980 and pledged to put the first woman on the bench.
And he did.
And he did. Sandra Day O'Connor was his nomination, and the first woman to be selected and put on by the Senate, passed the qualifications there, and was on the bench.
Here's a trivia question. Years. Here's a trivia question for you, Janice.
Yeah.
Do you know which Reagan administration staff official vetted Judge O'Connor?
I would have no idea. Who is it?
Kenneth Starr.
Oh, really?
And he forgot to ask a crucial question. I suppose he got beat up in the White House. He forgot to ask Justice Sandra Day O'Connor about her position on abortion. If he would have, Justice O'Connor would have said, I believe that's a woman's choice. So either the Reagan administration, this is what I suspect, the Reagan administration were really country club Republicans. They don't care about social issues. They care about the money. Just take care of the money, keep the money coming our way, and everything is fine, and you people do whatever the hell you want. But the Republicans always act like culture warriors. Oh, we want to ban abortion or ban that. No, they don't. No, they don't.
Yeah, I think, starchy conservatives were concerned both about her position on abortion and the Equal Rights Amendment as well. I know
That's
that was
right.
troubling for.
But I
for
found it
conservatives.
interesting that Kenneth Starr, of all people, an
Yeah.
ultra conservative, was the person who vetted Sandra Day O'Connor. All they seem to know or need to know is that she was from. She had one time supported Barry Goldwater,
Yep.
and she was from Arizona.
Yep.
And she was a woman,
And a
of
big
course.
rancher.
Big
A big
rancher.
rancher. I mean, her family came from a big ranch, so that might have weighed heavily for Reagan. I don't know, but in any event, I think it is important to break that barrier. Again, the credentials and qualifications are absolute paramount. That's the starting point.
Certainly.
But once you look at that pool, we have to believe that in many years past, there have been plenty of female candidates of color that met those standards and just were overlooked. So I think it is important. And I don't know. I've heard two names kind of rise to the surface. I don't know either of them at all, and really know nothing about them other than one of them apparently has just recently passed Senate confirmation 5344.
Is that Brown?
So he,
Ketanji Brown?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So it'd be rather unusual for within months for, some senators to flip flop. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm just saying they'd have some splaining to do. It would look rather troubling that she was qualified in one situation but not the other.
I get in trouble for saying these things because I'm this old sexist pig, apparently. But I occasionally judge people by their appearance, and Ketanji Brown's a very attractive woman. She's married to a white guy, and I'll tell you right now, an old white guy, she could do better. Me, for example. But your point is that a black female judge is going to rule differently because she is a black female.
No, I don't think they're going to rule differently. I just think the discussion in the room is different. I have to believe, there's been some cases, and I won't get into details, but even within our state, when we had an all-male Supreme Court,
yes,
that if there would have been just one female voice in that room, I think it would have been different, just because you hear different words, different backgrounds, different understandings regarding the same facts. That doesn't mean you're not honoring the Constitution. It just means you bring a different dynamic to that discussion. And that would be the one fascinating thing to do at any Supreme Court level, is to be in that room when the justices are expressing their points. And I'm sure sometimes those discussions get rather heated, as they should, because what's at stake is big in many cases. And so it should be, the discussion should be measured and heated. But it's a different dynamic if you have 5 people sitting around a table that are as exactly the same as any 5 people could be. You don't hear different things. And I'll just relate it to, growing up, the discussions around my family dinner table were the same. I heard consistent stories, consistent messaging. When you leave that environment and you sit at a different family's table, it's eye-opening because you hear different viewpoints than what you've heard in the past. And I think that that's the important part of having, some diversity in the discussion room there, just to share different points of view.
I would remind you of 2 things. First of all, the Warren Court of the 1960s. That was a bunch of white guys. All of them were older white guys. I think I think there was one Jewish member at the time, which was kind of a big deal, even though we've had Jews on the Supreme Court going back to the beginning of the 20th century. But at the time, having a Jew on the court, a Jewish person on the court, was a big deal. But those 9 old white guys, including the Irish Catholic William Brennan, who I'm fascinated by, changed our country. I mean, they found things in the Constitution that simply were not there. And by the way, Harry Blackmun, and later in life, and I've probably mentioned this to you before, Harry Blackmun, who was one of the co-authors of Roe versus Wade, he said in the 90s, after he was retiring when Bill Clinton was president, he said, we had to pass Roe versus Wade so women could be equal. He said nothing about abortion being constitutionally authorized. Now, I would point out one other thing. Amy Barrett Comey, who sits on the court now, is a woman, but she's an observant Catholic, which drives people who believe in abortion rights completely insane. So I guess what I'm saying is that women can be very conservative.
Absolutely.
I mean, Clarence Thomas really freaked out the black community, the African American community. He was certainly and remains certainly an African American and a brilliant jurist, I think. But he is really a constitutional originalist, as they say. He doesn't pay attention to race. He is a constitutionalist. Is that what we want? I guess this is where I'm going with this is, do we want a constitutionalist, or do we want someone on the court who sees the Constitution as a living document? That's a concept out there that I know you're aware of. Living document. We're going to expand liberty. I believe the late Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court, Mark Cady, didn't say living document, but he made references to extending liberty in when he was on the bench. Those are the two different frameworks. I have no problem living by the Constitution or the laws of the land, by the way. I have a problem with activist judges.
Yeah, and I guess I've always said an activist judge is one you disagree with. That's the definition of an activist judge. If they rule as you want them to, you don't see them as activists. But and even going back to what you were saying about Justice Brennan, when he said, Roe versus Wade was about making women equal, that is the Constitution. He's talking about the Constitution there. There is due process and equal protection in the Constitution. And so, that comment itself suggests that he was following the Constitution. We also always need to remember that the Constitution was written by, guess what? A bunch of white men.
Yes.
At the time they wrote the words, all men are created equal, even they didn't believe that.
Yeah, they were slaveholders. Yeah.
So, I'm kind of in the middle, and I don't think the Constitution just gives us free will here, so to speak, but I do think it's more of a living document to the extent that we have to take into consideration the writings that were done and the thinking at that time, where women weren't able to own property. Women were seen, or actually they were seen as property. Men were treated them that way. So, with that context, I think it makes a difference in looking at the words of the Constitution. And to me, a strict interpretation of the Constitution, when you look at the Equal Protection Clause, it allows for many of the marriage laws that have been passed, women being allowed to get credit cards in their own name and, buy property and all these things that so many take for granted that really didn't happen until not that long ago, my lifetime. It's been in my lifetime. So, I do think I would like to wonder what Clarence Thomas would have ruled on some of these issues regarding, can a woman own property? I would like to think that he would think the Constitution allows that.
I would hope so. Yeah.
But we don't know that. I mean, if
we
he's
don't know
thinking
that.
really back to strict, I mean, if he's thinking it's what the founding fathers thought, that would be how he would rule. And I would like to think most people listening would be frightened by that.
What you're talking about, though, Janice, is an expansive view of the Constitution. You can find all kinds of things in the 14th Amendment. You know I'm a reader. By the way, did you ever buy Cast by Isabel Wilkinson? We talked about that.
I did, and I started it. I have
Okay.
not had a time to finish it because life kind of got in the way here for a bit.
Hey,
but
I
it's a
understand.
very good read.
None of us.
So
It is.
far.
It is a great read, and none of us have seen a lot of time for leisure reading, which is unfortunate. But if you enjoy Cast, I picked up a couple of books, and I'm always buying books. God, my son gets all over me. He says, "You must have 500 books." And I said, "No, 600." But but he there is a book, a great workout now called Roe versus Wade, which focuses on Norma Corvey, who was Jane Roe, and she was a sociopath. I mean, and also. Linda Coffey was the young female attorney from the University of Texas,
Right.
who filed the papers. But the person, also a female attorney who carried the ball, is the one more widely known, and she just died recently. But anyway,
Right.
she went to the Supreme Court with this story that this poor Dallas waitress had been raped by 5 black men, and she had to have an abortion for that reason. Now, you say that in court today, and you're going to be thrown out for being a racist, appropriately, by the way. But it worked, I guess. Roe versus Wade is a fascinating read by Josh. Gosh, I can't remember his last name now. I'll get back to you.
I'll have to check that out.
But there's another new workout called the 14th Amendment. That's the name of the book, and I'll text you the authors of that book as well. But it's an interesting read. It's an interesting. Of course, it was published for general consumption. It wasn't a law school graduate book or anything like that, I suppose. But
thank God.
I'll tell you, my hat's off to all lawyers everywhere for being able to read that gibberish in law journals and law books. And God Almighty! As a matter of fact, a number of years ago, I think when it was not Brennan, but the one after Earl Warren, when he stepped down, he insisted that that when lawyers talked in court and spoke in the legal language, that they would make sure that everybody in the courtroom understood the legal language, because he believed that some lawyers, perish the thought, would be using legal language to confuse people. He was on a gosh, who am I thinking of? Doggone it, Warren Burger. That's what I'm thinking of. That was Warren Burger's position. I was wholeheartedly in favor of it. This is AM 1400 KBFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. Janice, as you know, I own guns. I support right to carry. I support constitutional carry. I support all these things. I do not support crazy people or drunken people using these weapons ever or having them in their possession. Every time I see something like I saw on KCCI News last night, it makes me sick. A 21-year-old young man, whole life in front of him, a specialist in the Iowa National Guard, just getting started in life, hanging around with a friend of his, and his friend was drunk, and he accidentally fired the gun and killed this young man. Just killed him, Eli Reed. Just despicable. I mean, with freedom comes responsibility, for God's sake.
Yep. Yeah. I haven't got all the details yet, but I was just recently contacted by an individual who, in her workplace situation, she goes into homes and assists with caretaking, and had a client's son pull a gun on her. The trauma that is caused by those types of incidents, and fortunately she's alive to tell the story to me. But you're right, this young man who, for what we're reading, and there's always maybe a backstory, but total stand-up guy who's defending our country, and ends up dead with a gunshot to his face. I mean, this isn't like it was a misfire into the ceiling, and accidentally ricocheted and hit him. It was to the face, and it's just sickening.
It is sickening, and the man who pulled the trigger and now faces involuntary manslaughter charges. He's a young man too. His life is probably screwed up now. But I taught my son and his little friends gun safety. Never point a gun at anyone.
Absolutely.
I must have forgot to say don't handle weapons when you get totally drunk or something. It was very disturbing for, and this gives ammunition to people who want to ban guns or roll back gun rights, and I'm not in favor of that. But I have come around. Luke Fleener, right after he was elected, you may recall, he decided to ban guns in the courthouse. And he even put a metal detector in the front door of the courthouse. Well, I was one who went over to the Board of Supervisors meeting and argued against that rule at the time. I thought it was an infringement on gun rights. But since that time, I've done a lot of thinking, and I don't think the courtroom is a good idea. I don't think carrying guns in the courthouse is a good idea for kind of the reason you just mentioned. It sounds like your friend was a social worker or a person like that, or a caregiver of some sort. And you don't know what kind of house you're walking into, you don't.
Right. Well, and you think about what gets handled, the majority of the situations that are managed in the courthouse, criminal and family domestic matters are the majority of the matters that get heard in the courthouse day to day. And both of those come with a lot of volatility, or can. I mean, obviously not every divorce is volatile.
Right.
But we all know situations where it has become volatile and fatal. And thankfully, we've dodged the bullets, literally and figuratively, in our own courthouses here. But you don't have to travel very far to hear and know of situations where judges and or parties have been shot by individuals using the facilities because of the escalation of the situation before them. And it's hard to know. I think for me the hard part would be where to draw that line. I think obviously if you're charged with domestic assault and the law is you are not to own or have control of a weapon, but laws are on paper.
Yeah.
They don't run around the community and police things. And our law enforcement, I think, does a great job of doing what they do, but they can't be everywhere every single moment of the day either.
Of course not.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I wish as a country, again, laws are on paper, I get it, but that we could come together and put some common sense. That's what I would call it, limitations. And when I say that, I'm with you, Mike. I want anyone to own a gun that's sane and responsible to own a gun, and maybe you need to be required, just like I had to take driver's ed.
Yeah.
You should be required to have some kind of classes on how to use this gun safely. But it seems like as soon as you mention anything about that, everybody just gets up in arms and you're taking my guns away. And it's like, I don't want to take your guns away. I would like there to be a little more common sense approach to how they are implemented.
A gun has one function. That's to kill something.
To kill, right.
That's it. It's not a hammer. It's not a wrench. It's not a tire iron. It's a gun. And the sole function of a gun is to kill. Now, I've enjoyed pheasant hunting over the many years. A lot of people like to go deer hunting, all those sort of things. Of course, they do bow. And you probably had a gun in your house when you grew up, if you grew up out on the farm.
Yep.
But
we had a couple of rifles. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Has the whole world gone crazy? Luke Fleener even made some sort of reference to that in these violent times, that's not what he said, but he made mention in these times, maybe we need to do more gun safety in courthouses. And I guess he was right. I don't know, the culture has changed or something. But Janice Valentine has been our guest. Go Hawks tonight against Penn State.
Hey, isn't that, and go Drake. Come on.
Go. Absolutely.
Bring it home.
Thanks, Janice.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Straight talk on life and money. This is the Dave Ramsey Show on the voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400, KVFD, Fort Dodge.
Double duty for the president in Pittsburgh. Lisa Brady, Fox News. He made a scheduled visit to the city just hours after a bridge collapsed. Fox's Tanya J. Powers has this live.
Lisa, President Biden is talking infrastructure at Carnegie Mellon University after an earlier visit with first responders at the site of that bridge collapse in Pittsburgh.
Across the country, there are 45,000 bridges in poor condition. It's just simply